came from a medical family where my father was a physician, and I had a very deep interest in healing sciences and healing arts. And in 1999, I started to study Ayurveda in South Africa. There were teachers there, and I found it a very complete system, even though it was ancient from very distant past. We're talking a few thousand years. It has a documented history. It was actually very modern. And I traveled over India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, throughout India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. I also visited Tibet. I resided some years in Nepal, and I tried to meet as many traditional physicians as possible, and try to understand the practical applications of Ayurveda deeply. And as I went deeper and deeper into Ayurveda, I kept getting pointed to Sanskrit, because all of the literature, all of the terminology was in Sanskrit, and I had this intense curiosity. Prior to my interest in Sanskrit, I had studied Latin at school, which is another Indo-European language, and I'd also lived in many different countries and learned to speak, learned basic fluency in a number of languages. I think about 8 to 10 languages I'd learned: Japanese, Hebrew, a bit of Arabic, obviously French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Nepali after living in Nepal. So I started to develop this intense interest in Sanskrit, and there was immense beauty in the language, that anyone who encounters Sanskrit will realize there's something quite wonderful there about the sound, just the simple sounds. So what happened is, in 2007, I moved to Auroville and I started to live here. And I was volunteering, helping with the cooking in the kitchen, where we were implementing Ayurvedic aspects of nutrition, where you would combine foods with spices and so forth. There's a whole, one of the pillars of Ayurveda is nutrition. And there was a teacher in Auroville who started to give me classes in Sanskrit. His name was Agni. He was actually a Canadian, but he had taken a Sanskrit name of Agni. And I became extremely curious, but I also realized that Sanskrit is a very steep mountain, almost a Himalayan peak, and requires immense effort and dedication. It's not something you just acquire in a short period. It really was a commitment of a decade at least. So I decided I was going to study it at university, and I searched around the world for universities that I could study, preferably remotely. And I came across the Australian National University, where Dr. McComas Taylor was pioneering digital delivery of Sanskrit, where the lectures would be a few hours weekly online, and practicals would be done ourselves. So we would meet a few times a week for actual virtual classrooms using a platform. Then this was long before COVID. We're talking in 2010. Platform called Adobe Connect. Google Classroom and the other learning delivery platforms for real-time lectures were not so mature. Adobe Connect was the best system at the time. And I enrolled in an undergraduate degree majoring in Sanskrit as a remote audit student, basically, at ANU. And while I was studying, having a background in computer science, I started to create tools. I saw that there were opportunities to create tools that would make it easier for me to learn the language, and also to appreciate the language and enjoy it. And also to bring out its beauty through digital expositions. For example, Sanskrit has more than 200 words to say the word sun or moon or sky or rain. This is very exceptional, and we started to work with teams of volunteers in Auroville. The beauty of Auroville is you have this incredible spirit of volunteership. Everyone comes to Auroville as a volunteer and gives their time to the community. And this is really how you join Auroville. People often ask me, how do you join this community? Well, you work your way in through the labor of love. So my labor of love at this time became the Sanskrit work. And slowly we formalized it and formed it into a proper unit with a proper office. with a name which became Sanskrit Research Institute, which was a kind of play on words, because often the rishis would play with sounds. So there is a mantric sound Shri, which means glorious or splendid in Sanskrit. But we took the Anglicization of the name, the acronym Sanskrit Research Institute. So we're actually called Shri when people come to us. But it's SRI also, or Sanskrit Research Institute. So this journey started through my father's physicianship, to my discovery of natural medicine, and then my very deep discovery with Ayurveda. I spent 12 years devoted to Ayurveda and really trying to meet everyone I could, attending conferences, reading the literature in the original language. That means the Samhitas, Charaka Samhita and Susruta, and the Vagbhata Samhita, that's the Ashtanga Hridaya. And then I started this journey of climbing the mountain of Sanskrit, which started with a 3-year undergraduate degree. And then I started postgraduate, which led me into Panini and the Vedas. And it continues today, because during that journey, while I was receiving from a beautiful teacher in Australia, at a university ironically called Anu University, ANU, which Anu is a Sanskrit word, which means the smallest particle, or atomic, you could say. I then started to give back, and through this incredible, we've had tens of volunteers, incredible people, often people that would be earning lakhs in Silicon Bangalore, programmers. We've got programmers in our office who could easily be earning 1 or 2 lakhs a month, would come and volunteer just for food. We give electric vehicle charging, and sometimes we give accommodation. And what they do is they get this incredible reward of working with this incredible language, that the deeper you dig with Sanskrit, the more further you go into this quest for creating knowledge. It's not just about language, but it's really about creating knowledge, because Sanskrit is just a language, but it's the knowledge that's been written in Sanskrit that really is the juicy fruit that one gets to consume once one acquires that language. So my journey begins in South Africa from medicine, bringing me to India in 2003, and then Auroville in 2007. And then this incredible curiosity to understand one Shastra, which is the Ayurveda, the knowledge of Ayu means long lifespan, which ironically now at Harvard University, there's a Professor David Sinclair who conducts a department of lifespan extension, or longevity, or regenerative medicine. So this idea of extending lifespan, the seed was formed at least 500 BC in the documented literary history of this beautiful Ayurveda. And it's actually very modern. And this is the beauty of Ayurveda, is that it's ancient, but it can be very modernly applied. I'm sitting on a panel now with the many eminent Indian scholars, the founder of the chair of Nalanda University, and I'll give you his name of these scholars. I'll give it later, the exact name. It slipped my mind, but this is a panel that is looking for Ayurvedic solutions from the literature, and that would be applicable and can help with cancer pain management today, and other adjunctives in modern medicine. And they're going to be doing clinical doctoral level research on this. So this is my journey with Sanskrit, and it's still the most wonderful journey that I have. It's actually taken me over the oceans. Ironically, the Brahmanas were not meant to cross the oceans, but I've come from over the oceans, and it's taken me, I gave a lecture on Sanskrit at the University of Cape Town a year and a half ago, and now they've invited me to work with the oldest people in the world, which is the San people of Southern Africa, and particularly the Southern Cape. And these were the people that inhabited places like Pinnacle Point and Blombos Cave, and developed the earliest abstract thinking and possibly the earliest languages. Noam Chomsky has sent me a paper by a Dutch scholar. I'll give you the name of that scholar. I think it's Louis Brechts, on how he believes, and quite strongly, there's a strong argument that these click languages were the oldest beginnings of language that we know. And these people, the San people, ironically similar to Sanskrit, no link, obviously linguistically, but the San people are holding the oldest genetic history of mankind. So from this lecture on Sanskrit, I was invited to conduct a lecture, conduct a project working on these endangered languages. And the journey with Sanskrit is full of surprises and wonderment. Literally every week, we get the most incredible people from around the world knocking on our door and saying, we want to work with Sanskrit from all backgrounds. So it really is, has been an incredible gift. And that's how I came to work with Sanskrit. I came to be in Pondicherry. Why I lived in Auroville? Well, I think you know the answer to that already. Any Indian or any non-Indian who visits Auroville will be touched by this 50+ year project that's devoted singularly to creating a place for human unity. It's incredibly creative, incredibly diverse. It's an incredibly beautiful place. It was a desert, it was barren, and it was deprived of all flora and fauna. And now there's a vibrant, thriving forest here. And in this forest, our vibrant, thriving, creative network, a web of incredible energy of people who come and give their work for the highest expression of mankind. Auroville is especially charged. There's a magical aura, and I'm very honored to have my institute here and to be part of this bigger picture of the most successful community that we have created. Yes, we've created cities like New York, London, and Amsterdam, but I've lived in all of them, and neither have the magic of Auroville. Auroville is this incredible city built on devotion to higher aspiration. So that's why I'm in Auroville. I came here as a volunteer, like many people. Initially came as a tourist, really, just to visit with my wife. And I saw that the water was dynamized. I saw that the food was organic. I saw that the cashews, there was a project working with the cashews to get away from the endosulfan. I saw that the building was built from earth. I saw there was a project with the clothing. So I saw in matter and in spirit that this place was doing something magical and could not leave. And then I said, well, how do I get to live here? I'm sure this has crossed your mind too. And the answer was, you've got to work your way in. The most beautiful, you can't buy your way in. Like, you had this community forming in Bangalore called Zed. I don't know if you remember it. They were doing the sustainable village. And there you needed a few crores. Here, you don't need crores, you need time. Time is the currency in Auroville. So we both gave our time. We worked in the solar kitchen. I did Ayurvedic seminars, and I helped convert the kitchen at Verite, the community. There's communities within communities. I helped the kitchen convert to organic and convert to more Ayurvedic combinations. There's some yoga and some skara we call in the cooking. And then they gave us a home, and from that home we got to have a root and a base. And then I had kids, and the kids grew up here and started to cycle around and live and explore. So my Sanskrit work, I do other works in Auroville. I'm also incubating a project called CEDAR, Center for Eco-Village Development Research, which is studying Auroville as a blueprint and then helping and hand-holding communities. We're doing our first project in South Africa now, a community called Goodwill Mountain. We're helping to create more Aurovilles around the world. And a lot of people come here and they ask me, why are there not more places like this? Of course, there are other communities like Findhorn and Tamara and Damahur and so forth, but there's no other communities as successful as Auroville. So I'm also incubating this project to create communities. So Sanskrit is this amazing journey. You never know where it will take you. You never know what doors it will open. I've had the most incredible people knock on the door and say, this is my relationship and my connection with Sanskrit. It crosses countries, it crosses barriers, it opens doors. As you well know, it's been taught in schools across the world. There's the St. James schools that are teaching it, and they're teaching it because they feel it's an amazing intellectual exercise, and it stretches your intellect. And of course, geographically, it crossed the divide of religions and of cultures there are remnants of Sanskritic culture spanning from Iran to the Philippines. So it's not just an Indian uh, production. It really was alive, and it was the thread of a civilization that gave the world so much. It unified and it combined so much of humanity.
Thank you so much, Martin. I like the word aspirational, and India aspires that Sanskrit at some point of time will be considered among the world's most spoken languages, along with English and French and Spanish. And how you are doing a lot of work in making it accessible and modernizing it in many ways.
Yes.
Can you talk us through like your dictionary work, and why is it, it's a spoken oral tradition
Yeah.
uh, as far as ancient India was concerned, but now we are making it a digitalized
Yes.
tradition. Why is it important in the dissemination and learning of the language?
Sanskrit actually was of course, it was an oral tradition before writing was developed, but it was very much so and written down. And interestingly, and your readers might not know this, it says my connection's unstable. Is that okay now? Sanskrit has the largest corpus of literature in any language on earth before Gutenberg, before printing, which is not so long ago. The largest corpus of literature is in Sanskrit. It is the language. We don't know exactly how much larger, because the ocean of Sanskritic literature hasn't been fully mapped. Every village and every ruler and elder and village elder and king had their own collection, and very few of those collections have been exactly documented. There's the National Mission of Manuscripts in Delhi, and they have already got a database of millions of manuscripts, and their work is only scratching the surface of what's out there. And there would have been collections spanned in not just India, but Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, of course, has already been studied. There's the Nepal German Manuscript Project. So Sanskrit is not just an oral, it was oral until writing was developed, and then it has become literature, from an orature to a literature. There was obviously a strong emphasis on intellectual arts and memorization. There were the 64 arts. I don't know if you've ever studied the list of the 64 arts that Krishna and his brother studied. It was mentioned in the literature that they went away. He studied in something ridiculous like 18 days. It was like, this super Elon Musk level intellectual capacity, or way beyond, we would say. And basically, one of the arts was memorization, and there were techniques of memorization, different mnemonics and so forth, just like your IIT students in India who want to get into the IIT would have to have techniques of memorization. So even though these sciences were ancient, there was very, very modern. There's 64 arts. So why did we work with digital tools? Well, I had, from age 13, I had worked with computers. I had fallen in love with computers. I'd been lost in that world of computer science. So this was really from 1987, when the world, it was not computerized. Only your very big companies had mainframes, and the personal computer was just being born. People like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates was still unknown and not billionaires yet, and Bezos. So I became a hacker in my early teens, and I even had done some ethical hacking as anti-apartheid activism for organizations that wanted me to retrieve information from the apartheid government. So I used those skills, and I had fallen in love with computers. And when I fell in love with Sanskrit, it was an incredible marriage. There was already a lot of work done with, there was already development of a subject that's called computational linguistics and Sanskrit. There were people like Gerard Hewitt and Oliver Helvig, Peter Schaaf. that had already used the early DOS computers and built systems and software, and some of the IITs, Kharagpur and so forth, had already, Mumbai and so forth, had already been working on this. And I saw that there were gaps. I saw there were dictionaries, but they weren't combining all dictionaries into one, and Sanskrit was too diverse to just have one dictionary. Often when I was studying, I would never look in just Monia Williams or Apte. I would want to get Abhyankar's dictionary, which was a grammatical dictionary, or I wanted to get a dictionary on medicine or on Jyotisha. So what we did first was we glued a lot of dictionaries together, and we made a meta dictionary. And this became very useful, and we never marketed or announced anything we did. We just put it out there, really. And I think our dictionary has around 100,000 users a month using it. So for us, the proof of the pudding was really in the eating, was the fact that it was actually used and usable, and that people engaged. It wasn't really about creating something that was presented in a seminal paper at a conference, although we did present at conferences, but we presented practically, not really theoretically. I would demo at the World Sanskrit Conference in 2015, and then again in Kharagpur last year at the Computational Linguist Conference, and wherever I could share with the scholars in academia, we would share our vision and also what we've done and completed. We also made a text-to-speech engine for Sanskrit. We did a survey. What we would do is, before we would embark on any journey, we would see what had been done, and there, I think it was one of the governmental departments, CDAC, had attempted it, but nothing was available. There was nothing. Often there'd been these multi-crore projects, but the work had been supposedly done, but it was never there to be delivered and usable for people. Another example was the Digital Library of India. There was 500,000 old works that were scanned, and then suddenly it just disappeared off the internet. So we had fortunately crawled that over about 6 months and created a mirror of it and put that in the public domain, and also helped archive.org to work with them. We often do collaborations with individuals at Google. We're going to start a collaboration with DeepMind, the very famous project that everyone's a little bit scared of because they're at the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence. There's this fear developing of artificial intelligence that once we have singularity and superhuman intellectual power that can do everything we can do and better. But we are working and engaging. DeepMind did a beautiful project with Greek epigraphy, and it's now reading Greek epigraphical works better than humans. And we want to use their know-how and their neural networks for Sanskrit manuscript digitization, which is this incredible need. And wherever we saw a need that computers could marry with Sanskrit and do something useful, we wanted to help people to digitize Sanskrit works. So we worked with, initially we built our own tool using a system called Tesseract, which is an open source computer vision engine, neural network engine that helps to read literature and convert it into digitized Unicode text. And initially we were working with the Tesseract, and then we realized that we need to work with a much larger organization. So I created a link with a computer scientist called Ashok Popat, also a second or first generation Indian in America, working at Google in a very senior position with computer vision and working with index scripts. And we started to create this feedback loop for the Sanskrit work and to help to get a better recognition for Sanskrit text. And now that is available, we've got an OCR engine. At last count, I'll just give you some statistics there. Wow, it's 3.2 million images. That means pages of works have been digitized, and about 77 million words have been recognized. No, I think it must be more. It must be 7.7 billion. Let's just double check that number. Sorry, it's got a lot of zeros. 770 million words have been recognized by that. And that is being used by the community that are crowdsourcing and digitizing Sanskrit literature. So really our success is when, as Paul McCartney said, he felt he had succeeded when the postman was singing yesterday. So when the postman sings one of our songs, we feel we've succeeded, basically.
There's just one point of concern that a lot of Indic people feel, Martin. It's probably comes with the territory, which is, of how we know when in India doesn't have the resources, or probably, because of whatever, to do the kind of work which requires has neither the monetary resources or the will, or maybe blame it on colonization to preserve all this.
Yeah.
So is there when we talk about recognition of Sanskrit texts, is there attribution, and how do we keep India's interests
Yeah. So
intact? You're a
absolutely.
person who's in Auroville. You are part of the system, but there are many who who come from academia abroad, and take whatever the at the surface level, engage and appropriate it. So
Absolutely. There
what do we do?
obviously, so I think you're touching upon the sort of politics of Sanskrit. There is a lot of politics that come into all academia in any field. Even now I'm working with endangered Khoisan languages, and the politics are in a marriage. Even when you get married, you have politics between your husband and the wife. What I do is I stay on the science, and I stay dedicated to serving science. If you say any scientist that would have been from anywhere, let's say the scientist who invented this Zoom video conferencing, we're using it in every corner of Earth. It becomes non-geographical, non sort of, the company might be in America, but the patents might be here or there, but we are using the technology now and benefiting for our, of course, this is a protected intellectual property. So the way we work is with copyrighted works. Of course, the literature itself in Sanskrit is out of copyright. And the rishis always very clearly said, we give this for mankind, for the entire world. And this is really why things like yoga have exported so globally, because it was given for mankind. So people like Iyengar, Patabi Joyce, they took it really ex-India. And I think Japan is the largest growing yoga community in the world. And of course, it got its flavors when something gets taken out, just like a language. When a language moves out, it will get changed wherever it will go. The beauty with the Sanskrit language per se is it was frozen by Panini, the modern Sanskrit, not the Vedic and the Middle Sanskrit. Panini froze the grammar. So even if you and I were to compose Sanskrit poetry today, we would be restricted by Panini's framework of grammar, which is quite rigid. And this is the beauty of Sanskrit, is that I can read something from 100 BC and something from 1000 BC, and it will be the same grammar. So it's a bit like a computer language that we've kept the consistent syntax. So programmers can now program with it all over the world. So this is really Sanskrit's rare beauty. If you take English of Chaucer, Shakespeare, and now the English we're using, they're very different. If you take that French, Old French, Middle and Modern French, even taking a hip-hop rap song of English and an Oxfordian English, there's going to be great differences in the usage and the grammar and the meanings of certain words. So Sanskrit didn't have that liberty, and that was the beauty. And in terms of the intellectual property, obviously there are many international scholars and universities preserving, digitizing, working with Sanskrit. There's great manuscripted collections all over the world. It's basically seen as a group effort, a global effort. It's been adopted globally. There's the World Sanskrit Conference, which happens every few years. That basically is a global collection of scholars. The bulk of Sanskrit work is not dominated by one particular geography. It's really dispersed. When I go to a conference, I will find scholars from, it's a bit of an Auroville or United Nations. So really, Sanskrit has moved beyond geographical barriers. And in our own work, we work with the intellectual property. If a particular work is digitized and is still under copyright, and we would like to publish it, we obviously request permission. there were some works with the, I think it was the University of Chicago Press, you'll see. And then there was works of different Indian volunteer groups that we've requested permission. And if the permission isn't granted, then we obviously respect that. So we basically work with the norms of intellectual property. And then if we do publish a new work, we put it in the public domain as Creative Commons in the spirit of what the rishis were aiming for, which is that this work is not actually to be copyrighted. It is really for, if you read the Parashahora Shastra, Parashahora Shastra, I can read it for you. Okay, it's not here in this library. It's basically, I give this work for the benefit of man. Charaka, I give this work for the benefit of man to alleviate suffering. Krishna and Arjuna are giving this for all beings to have a better life. Gandhi spoke so beautifully about the Gita, like how he would carry it around with him. And so many non-Indians, and I don't think there really is this, the Vedic culture and the Sanskritic culture was a global culture. It did not see itself as tied to one particular geography or religion, because many religions were born from India. There was Jainism, there's Sikhism, there's Buddhism, and Hinduism. And Hinduism is very different to Abrahamic religions because it gives, within Hinduism, you can have atheism, theism, you can have polytheism, monotheism, all in one container, and no one bothers whether you have one God, unlimited gods, limitless gods, a named God, a nameless God. So really you've got the ultimate version of a religion. You cannot get better because if you want to have one God and call it this name, Hinduism accepts that. And if you want to have it as a formless, nameless, defineless God, similar to the Judaic God, Hinduism accepts that. And if you want to have everything as God, Hindu accepts that. So you really have this incredible intellectual tradition, philosophical, epistemological, logical. You basically have this ultimate development, and this is really what brings people to India, is that openness, and then of course, as Salman Rushdie said, the intense color, the intense depth of culture, and the spirit, and the festivals, and the anarchy, and the order, and the incredible beauty of this nation called India.
A lot of contradictions, I guess. Martin, how is, we've spoken about it in India and in South Africa in particular, what is the presence of Sanskrit and Ayurveda? Is there, it's very dominant in Europe, for instance. I mean, there's a lot of Indology institutes and a lot of study done there. How is it in South Africa?
Sure. So South Africa has a large Indian population. I think it's 1.5 million Indians. So there naturally is and they have come often as indentured laborers from Gujarat, from Tamil Nadu, and then settled there and become multi-generational Indians. So there's obviously a liturgical and religious use of Sanskrit in the Hindu population of South Africa. There are Hindu temples. There's in the city I live of Cape Town, before the city I grew up in, there is Vishnu temple. There are multiple Krishna ISKCON centers throughout South Africa. There's a Shiva temple. And so obviously there, Sanskrit is used as it is in India in the temples. In terms of academic level Sanskrit, sadly not. It's something, we don't have any chair of Sanskrit, it's something that we would really love to have. We've had meetings with the High Consul, I think it's called Vice Consul or High Consul, and we've proposed this, and they are looking into bringing, they brought yoga teachers out for 10 years there, and they've done seminars. So we're looking into something, and it will be really lovely to have Sanskritic studies. I've given lectures there. The St. James schools are teaching there. So they have the School of Practical Philosophy, which runs very beautiful Sanskrit seminars. And there've been different ashrams of different paramparas from India, like Shivananda and so forth, that have had rudimentary Sanskritic works, but there's not enough in South Africa. It really needs to develop more. And there's definitely an interest and a will and a wish to develop. This can be done.
Varsha, do you have anything to ask Martin?
Yeah, I have one question. I'm not sure how relevant it would be, but when I used to apply for my doctoral studies to the US especially, I've seen a lot of my application forms used to ask for if you have knowledge of ancient languages, and Sanskrit was one of them. So how relevant is it for an admission process, especially when I'm not doing anything, and my admission is not even, my application is not even towards literature studies, it's towards another field. How relevant is that, and why do they even ask for it? Would you have an idea about it?
Are you saying when you're applying generally for any degree in the US,
Any degree, yeah.
They ask for your knowledge of ancient languages, but they don't specifically mention Sanskrit, or they do?
In the drop-down menu, you do have Sanskrit. So you have Latin, you have Sanskrit. So
well, yes, Sanskrit, I mean, it is extremely relevant in terms of humanities and linguistics. Sanskrit is of great significance. It's one of the most significant languages to study as a linguist, particularly if you're going to focus on Indo-European linguistics. Sanskrit formed a lot of the early linguistic frameworks of modern linguistics. Scholars like Chomsky have reference to this, and early, I think it was Kiparsky and so forth, early linguists around the world have been extremely influenced by the Sanskritic knowledge systems, particularly Panini. Panini has been called one of the greatest intellectual gifts that we have of the ancient world. If there was the 7 ancient wonders, intellectual wonders, Panini would be probably 2 of them at least. I devoted a fair bit of time to Panini, and still we do work with it. We've had seminars here in Auroville with Dr. Ramanath Sharma, one of the most eminent living Paninian scholars, who had a chair at the University of Hawaii and has visited Auroville regularly, and we're collaborating on digitizing his life works. His father was a Padma Shri for his work in the Vyakara and the grammar tradition, and he of course should win that award or even more. He should be recognized. He has obviously been recognized as an eminent Paninian scholar. So to answer your question, I would say Sanskrit is extremely significant for any intellectual studies. It forms one of the pillars of ancient linguistic and intellectual studies. In terms of students in India studying Sanskrit so they could get into a college in the US, I don't know. Of course, Sanskrit is going to stretch your mind. It's going to give you a mountain to climb intellectually. And as you know from neuroscience, when your brain is given challenges, it develops and grows. So in that way, and this has been studied, there are some studies with studying Sanskrit and its impact on the neurons. It's not my field of expertise, but you can look up the papers there. It definitely is very, very good for neural development. This is why the St. James schools are doing it. They feel that it's a very good foundation for the children. Generally in classics, you would learn Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. That would be like your, I mean, in classical studies, you would be encouraged to know those 3 languages. Of course, they're strongly linked, and about 46% of the world is using Indo-European languages today. So it's of great significance if you're going to study languages and linguistics.
All right. Thank you, Martin.
One last question, Martin. Today being Ram Navami, what are your, how has the Ramayana influenced, or what appeals to you about the Ramayana?
Wow, everything appeals to me. It's one of the greatest works of literature. In Ayurveda also we have that many of the plants are inspired by. So even if a work was giving you a story which covered history, and which covered how to live dharma. There would often be references, botanical references to plants and to fauna and flora. So much we can reconstruct from these stories of how life was. And India really had reached this incredible civilization when Europe, the US, South Africa, well, South Africa had, of course, its hunter-gatherer and had developed a beautiful mythology and a beautiful culture, orature, also stories, and beautiful, incredible knowledge, ethno-botanical knowledge was there, which is still continued today in these endangered languages and these San people and the Khoi people who came a bit later to South Africa. But this literature in India has captured so much of how life was, and it is significant that we have these memories, that we keep the identity strong, because the beauty of India is that the culture is still very much a living culture. So things that would be described in the Ramayana are still very much lived and acted out today. People will go and have yamun, and actually I was thinking of going to do a fast in a forest. I'm in a forest and eating just the yamun fruit, and seeing if I could lose some of this weight I've put on in the COVID. I think all of us have had this COVID syndrome of putting on weight and becoming too computer
Don't
attached.
remind us about.
So I thought I could do a bit of Ram Navami Langhana Chikitsa, which is the fasting therapy, and I'm thinking of doing this multi-day fast on yamun fruit, or something equivalent from the Auroville forest, and then doing a bit of Sanskrit recitation just to keep the mind off food, and so it's heavily India's got this incredible culture that's alive today, and the work that we're doing helps to preserve it, because so many Indians go, well, you know, how do I access my culture? So when you can digitally access it and also see that there are hundreds of synonyms, and see that there's a literature spanning tens of millions of manuscripts long before printing came to Europe, and that there were universities in India long before the University of Bologna, which was the first university in Europe, which was around a millennia ago. India had universities many millennia ago. And yes, they were sacked and looted and destroyed and faded to crumbs and ruins, but we can revive this intellectual tradition, and very much so it is. India is, Nalanda is now, there's this incredible wish to develop it further. The IITs are working very deeply on Sanskrit. I just saw a beautiful work from IIT Kharagpur, which has developed a neural network to rapidly tag Sanskrit literature, which we would love to work with. So it is coming very strongly in this neo-India, and we want to be part of that and part of this birth. Auroville represents the birth of a new India, really. So to all readers out there, come to Auroville, come and volunteer here. Don't just visit here as a tourist and take pictures and walk through the forest, but come and give some of your skills, particularly those that have developed talents and skills. Come and help build this city and build the future of India and the future of mankind. That's my call to all your readers.
Wonderful, Martin. Thank you so much. And it was really lovely engaging with you. And I hope we can meet soon in Pondicherry.
Please come and be my guest, and bring your team and meet our team, and let me know. I know that with the new restrictions, it's quite difficult to move around, but once it eases off, everything passes and ends. That's also what the Ramayana teaches us, that everything, no matter how traumatic, it does come to an end. And let's apply some of that knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll just trouble you for a few pictures, if you can share some pictures.
Pictures we will send you. You can and Jeff, you could send the recording to me for our archive. That will be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.